Questa mattina mi sono svegliato e ho ricevuto 111 messaggi per chiedermi se c'era posto qua dentro oggi. Ieri mattina mi ero svegliato e ne avevo ricevute 25. Per osmosi sono una rockstar. Ieri sono andato a Torino a sentirlo e ho visto che c'era uno snake, un serpente di persone che occupava 2 blocks a Torino. E uscendo mi hanno chiesto: tu l'hai visto? Gli ho detto: sì, l'ho visto. Qual è il suo hotel? E gli ho detto... E per osmosi sono stato una seconda volta una rockstar. Per la terza volta sono una rockstar stasera. Ma perché il libro, credo che neanche i Rolling Stone avrebbero potuto generare una coda, un entusiasmo, una curiosità, un senso di lettura così grande. Dicendo tutto questo ho pensato che l'idea di questo libro sia un libro sulle grandi cose della vita. Invece Foer ha scritto un romanzo sulle piccole cose della vita. E questo fa la differenza. Intanto benvenuto a Milano e dimmi se per favore se è vero che l'hai scritto sulle piccole cose della vita.
With this book, more than my previous books, I wanted to write something that would be not simply hard to summarize or hard to encapsulate. I've always been interested in that. Books where reading the description on the jacket is pointless or misleading, where the best recommendation that could be given to a reader is you just have to read it. You should really read it, and then we'll talk about what it's about. But with this book in particular, there's a kind of fullness that I wanted to capture. It's a book that doesn't have any one particular argument to make, but it's overflowing with arguments. When I was younger, I was very entranced by big things, really big gestures and big visuals, and you get a big crush on somebody and you express it through a big love poem, and you're always looking for the thing that is sort of elsewhere that could maybe be achieved with heroic effort, and it would have heroic or mythical payoffs. And as I've gotten older, I started to locate the significant things in life not in the elsewhere but in the presence. So in the book, it examines the details of daily life of a family. Things like how people brush their teeth and have little conversations while brushing their teeth, or the ways that you shop for breakfast and cook breakfast and clean up after breakfast and drive carpool and go to kids' football games and music lessons. And so these are the things that in this family, at least, they're often seen as diversions or worse, obstacles that stand in between them and the happiness that they want to either return to or reach for. If it weren't for all of the life that I'm living, I would actually be able to live the life I want to live. And the inability to locate the lives they want to live in the lives that they're actually living and being present in the here I am sense makes them want and makes them... There's a saying in the book, those who seek happiness flee from contentment. And these are people who flee from contentment, and it's not until the end that they start to see that the things they wanted were the things that they had.
E da questo punto di vista posso dirti però che ho ricalcato il tuo percorso che hai fatto. Ogni cosa illuminata è la magia. Molto forte, incredibilmente vicino, è l'immaginazione di Oscar. È la tua. Se niente importa è la scienza. Questo è come siamo, e come siamo non ha categoria. E i libri, quando si scrivono i libri come siamo, devi calarti giù in quella botola nera che Kafka diceva la mia cantina e sperare che non siano né libri profetici né libri di elaborazione del lutto. E voglio sapere dove sta questo libro di te, se è elaborazione del lutto o se è profetico o se è semplicemente un libro che ti ha attraversato. A volte succede e saresti fortunato.
In my first 2 books, I was working on books. And with this book, I do feel like I was working on both my art and my soul, for lack of a better word, at the same time. And it's not because the book is autobiographical, even though I stumbled on that word, which my therapist would say is proof that what I'm about to say is a lie. Even though the book is not autobiographical, which it truly is not. It is the most personal book I've ever written.
Scusa, ma ho proprio deciso di spolparti, perché tu non ci sei mai qua e abbiamo un'occasione e Milano non perdona.
So, no, it'd be easy to lie. Like a lie, I could just spit it out like that. But I'm trying to think of what I actually think.
Volevo chiederti se in qualche modo tu volevi dire io voglio provare a scrivere il grande romanzo americano. Mi viene in mente che negli ultimi anni tutti hanno provato a scrivere il grande romanzo americano. Un po' ce l'hanno fatto, un po' no. City on Fire, per esempio, oppure penso a Purity di Franzen. Tutti tentano le oltre 500 pagine, qualcuno inciampa, tutti cadono, qualcuno si rialza. Ce l'avevi in testa questa premeditazione?
Well, I know Franzen very well. We're friends. And I can tell you absolutely for sure he was not intending to write the great American novel. And he would find that idea silly. I had really no intentions when I wrote this book other than, and this is going to sound maybe a little bit simple or a little bit naive, or cliched, but I wanted to be proud of what I wrote. You know, like if I could write something that I was proud of, I would be happy. As it turns out, that's an incredibly difficult thing to do. The hardest thing, there are a lot of difficult things about writing books. It's not the easiest thing to make nice sentences, but truth be told, most people can make nice sentences if they try. The thing that's most difficult about writing is just caring over time, you know? And that also happens to be the most difficult thing about everything. You know, whether it's writing a novel or being in a relationship or having a job that isn't novel writing. I don't know anybody who has an easy time caring about things over time. I'm interested in writing the thing that I'm interested in over time. This book did not take me 11 years to write. It took me maybe 2 or 3 years to write. It just took me 8 or 9 years to start it because I was fumbling around down a sort of like walking down a dark hallway, flipping switches, hoping they were the ones to turn on the light, and they just weren't. I wrote 200 or 300 pages of a couple different novels. And maybe they were publishable, maybe they were okay, maybe they would have been entertaining, but I would not have been proud of them. You know, when I was in Turin and I drove up and I got out of the car, as we were driving up, there was this line of people around the block. And I thought, what are they doing? What are these Italians doing lining up for this book about like a Jewish family and an earthquake in Israel, and there's got to be 100 words in the book that those readers literally don't understand on the level of meaning. A lot of the cultural specificity has to be off-putting. There are so many reasons to assume it would not be for them, except that that's not really what books are about. You know, books have almost nothing to do with where the characters live and how they talk and what their religion is. They're always about something underneath the surface, which is very hard to talk about and often, ironically, eludes language or evades language, but creates these incredibly deep bridges. Everybody in here who reads, which I assume is everybody, knows that books are just the most intimate art form. They're not the best art form. They're not necessarily the art form that can move one most powerfully or can affect political change most efficiently, but they're the most intimate. But literature is the antidote to those generalizations. And those generalizations are a huge part of what is wrong with the world. The assumption that people like us will share things most deeply with us. So in the book, I try to trace, not explain, but just trace the progression between these two people who are constantly becoming closer on the level of living and doing. They exchange more and more words. They are always like filling out calendars and routines and doing domestic things together. And to the outside, it would appear as if not only do they have a great thing together, but they have an increasingly great thing together. Whereas inside, something in their inner lives is becoming alienated from one another and from oneself, to such a point that desire or a primitive need becomes the enemy, becomes a secret and becomes an enemy to domesticity. So that's one side, is tracing that. The other side is the effort to recognize that it's happening and to overcome it. You know, I believe that what I just described. Maybe somebody in this room is lucky enough to tell me otherwise later, but I believe some version of that is inevitable in every relationship. Some, like when things become closer up here and further apart down here. So then it becomes, what do you do with it? How do you fight against it, or do you just become resigned to it?
Sto cercando di abbracciare tutto quello che è il continente Foer, che è un continente della Madonna, per cui uno si sposta da destra e sinistra e cerca di toccare tutto. Non te la dovevo fare, ma te la voglio fare. Ma se non fossi diventato uno scrittore, cosa avresti fatto, visto che sei entrato dalla porta laterale? Non lo so, va bene lo stesso come risposta.
You know, I wanted to be an obstetrician, actually. No, I mean it. Not a gynecologist, an obstetrician. I wanted to deliver babies. Now, if I'd been an obstetrician at the end of the week, and I came home, I said, you know, I delivered 17 babies this week. What's the point? Like, the point is so self-evident. And I wish sometimes, I long to have a life where the good was self-evident. So, making any kind of art, I think, it's the least obvious good that one can do in the world. But that doesn't mean that the good isn't, in fact, the most powerful. It's just the least obvious. And the particular ways that it is unobvious, I think, beg us to ask really powerful questions, interesting questions.